The Privy Council had to pronounce upon that. So he used this witness statement, which was his second misbehavior, so that he could get his political opponents charged and brought before the court for misbehavior and conspiracy to commit fraud. Because you see, Faris Al-Rawi is a crafty guy. Faris Al-Rawi understands politics. Faris Al-Rawi understands that the courts in this country are slow. And Faris Al-Rawi understood that once he got rid of two of his opponents, who he saw as thorns in his side, and who were far better lawyers than he could ever be, then it would be smooth sailing thereon. Faris Al-Rawi tried to do what was done to Basdio Pandey, because they used the courts, they used the Anti-Corruption Bureau, and they got Basdio Pandey charged. And Basdio Pandey was only finally exonerated 2 months before his death. So he spent 20-something years in the wilderness. That is how the PNM uses the courts. That is how the PNM uses propaganda. And if they had evidence to charge Basdio Pandey in 2001, 2002, whenever he was charged for the airport business, how come all of a sudden the evidence was not good enough to proceed with? How come they had to drop the charges against him? And Faris Al-Rawi understood that once he could do that to two of his political opponents, then the PNM would be in power for as long as possible. Once he could broad brush and paint people on this side with that sort of conduct, that is how the PNM operates. So he understands misbehavior better than anybody else, better than John Bates. Never mind, he is not much of a lawyer. He is referred to as a pettifogger, because all he engages in is pettifoggery. Foggery. Stop laughing. Pettifoggery. Yeah. Well, yes, he also engages in that. So, Faris Al-Rawi, as a public officer, because he's a senator, he cannot be exonerated. You cannot. There is no way you can bring a sane argument and say that the person who did the wrongdoing was John Bates because Faris was not a member of the committee. That won't wash. That can't fly. That argument cannot fly. You want me to tell you why? Because he is a public officer. He is aware that John Bates was on the committee. He is aware that the committee was examining the conduct of the former Minister of Health, Terence Dialsing. He was aware of what the issues were. And with that awareness, knowing what the issues were, knowing fully well that Senator John Bates was a judge of sorts in the matter, he sat down with Senator John Bates, and if it were a court, he sat down and perverted the course of public justice. That's tantamount to what he did. So in Vincent Nelson, not only did he misbehave in public office, he perverted the course of public justice, and he breached provisions of the Plea Discussions and Agreement Act. And now he's back again. And now all of a sudden, it really was painful to watch the cowardice, the nauseating, sickening cowardice, the stench of that behavior from Trincity Maloney. Because I would have thought she would have, at the very least, tried to make an argument to mitigate against the conduct of John Bates. It seemed as though she was here to do two things. One, to protect her master, because that's what it is. And two, to see how she could antagonize everybody else. That's what she comes here to do. My friend Siobhan Assis will tell you. She's hardly ever here. And then, long before the tea break starts, she gets like either a whiff or she got the smell that the food is ready. And then she disappears very early. And then when we go down, we realize there's a food shortage. Because like she's packing it for the weekend. And then she disappears. I had to shout at her one time and say, there's not CPEP. And think, this is not a URP job. You come here, you just come, you don't say nothing. You come here, and then you try to truck things and say things that you know you can't say on the budget. Because what she said today about that land there, what she said 2 weeks ago, and the speaker tell her, if you can't back it up, withdraw it and apologize. And you know what? Right in the parliament, she had to withdraw and apologize. She didn't back it up in here, and was there, she can't That's why I didn't withdraw it. To say that she's an attorney at law, I have never seen her in practice. Yeah, it really is mind-boggling that she's an attorney at law. She and where's his name? Lupino, or whatever it is. It really is funny. But she came here, and instead of dealing with the matter, she came here to defend, to see how best she could defend the owner of the PNM. Because that's one thing that is clear today. That is one thing that is clear today, that Penny Beckers cannot touch Faris Al-Rawi. She wouldn't dare. And that shows you who owns the PNM. You know, this Senator Al-Rawi, from 2010 to 2015, stood up in the parliament and talked about, in every speech, even if he's talking about dangerous dogs, he had a slippy in campaign finance reform and how he could bring it. You know, they had 10 years and they still didn't bring it? 10 years. You know why he wouldn't bring it? Because once campaign finance reform is dealt with, he has no value in the PNM. His only value is the money he could bring. Because he is totally useless. When you hear his contributions in the Senate, totally useless. So, let me deal with two things about what she did. The member for Trinity Maloney. I mean, this had to be either rank dishonesty or the epitome of cognitive dissonance. Because she basically had no contribution to make. She came here to read from the minority report, kept quoting and saying, the minority report says X, the minority report says Y, and the minority report says Z. Right? But who is the minority? She. Isn't that dishonesty? Well, if you're talking about the minority report, say, I was the minority, and this is my report. Right? Own it. Yes, it would be himself to himself. Yes, it would be what lawyers call self-corroboration, or the rule against narrative, but apparently she doesn't know the rule against narrative. She's not much of a lawyer. But if you are quoting from something, don't pretend you are quoting from a minority report when you are the one who wrote the minority report. But guess what? I don't think she did write that minority report. She doesn't strike me as intelligent enough. She could hardly string an intelligible sentence together. It's only cuss and quarrel and insult. And then go and eat the people's food and disappear with a few boxes, and then the rest of the week, well, with the bread gone? With the lamb gone? She treats this house with contempt. Like Al-Rawi, like John Bates, just in a different way. She treats this house as URP. And probably, well, not school feeding, parliamentary feeding. Because she has nothing valid to offer. But, you know, so that's one thing about not mentioning that she was the minority. But the other thing is, having regard to her conduct, one day, I have no minority report, and then within 24 hours it was? You produce one? Is that really her? Maybe that's why she was citing the minority report, because it's not hers. Maybe that's another one that Faris typed up. I think the only difference between Faris and Dayal Singh is Dayal Singh has technological challenges, so he doesn't know how to come out of the document so that when you forward it, the track changes and the evidence of the track changes didn't become apparent. Because had it not been for him being computer illiterate, for want of a better term, we might have never known all of this. Thank God for rank stupidity, which reveals rank dishonesty. There's no other way. No, seriously, there's no other way to deal with this. And then, as if it's a big point, she wants to attack the speaker and say, well, you and blemish yourself, you know, you do something wrong too. You didn't disclose. But that utterance of hers need only be stated to be rejected. Because she only knew about that because the speaker disclosed it. And he disclosed it during the meeting